Hey, what's up guys? Will Sherland again with Gutter Fighting Secrets. I'm in LA and I just got done taking my second Urban Escape-and-Evasion course with On Point Tactical. We're here today with the founder of On Point, Kevin Reeve, and he's agreed to come on and share some really highly specialized information with us, stuff that he doesn't generally teach in his civilian courses. So, I explained to him a little bit about what I do and he said, look, that's awesome. Let's go ahead. Let's share with your guys some really good stuff. So with all that in mind, we'll introduce you and we'll take it from there. We're going to look at some stuff about cameras, some stuff about, urban escape and evasion, and we're going to really have some fun with it today. So let's jump right into it. So we're here with Kevin Reeve, and this guy is really amazing, and he's agreed to sit down with us before we get started with all the stuff that we were talking about and tell us a little bit about, number one, what On Point does and what they do here at On Point, and then also number two, a couple of really important things to keep in mind should you ever need to employ or deploy any of these escape and evasion techniques. So with all that in mind, Kevin, how are you, man?
Good to see you. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, dude, thank you for coming on. So we were kind of talking about before a little bit about what is urban escape and evasion, how is that different from like SEER training and stuff like that, and then also why should people kind of concentrate on urban escape and evasion more so than like wilderness and stuff like that?
Right. Well, the fact of the matter is that about 90% of the population live in urban areas. And the chances are pretty good. Most people work in urban areas, live in urban areas. Chances are pretty good if there's an event that ever occurs that it'll happen in an urban area. So we train for what we expect, and we expect problems in an urban area, then that's where we should train. So the idea of urban escape and evasion is a class that is designed to prepare you for a disaster or another event, any other kind of event that would disrupt, for example, the delivery of goods and services, which would cause widespread panic. Because there are so many people in such a dense area and such limited resources, you can expect to see some fairly chaotic situations and, I guess you would call it, uncivil behaviors. And that's what the class is designed to do, is prepare you for that.
So when we're talking about, a potential breakdown in society, a potential something like that, it doesn't necessarily have to be invasion of the Russians or something like that. Something as simple as an EMP could come through, whether that's from the sun, and it knocks down our transformers. And I don't know if I've talked about this with our viewers before, but we have been talking about this a little bit. Now, if one of these Carrington event things came through,
right?
These transformers that we have, it takes what, like a year to build a new one?
Yeah, a year or two, and they're not even built in the U.S. They're built in China. And so we have no transformer manufacturing in the United States. Hey, it's not going to go well. We will be out without power for at least a year. And the government estimates, this is the federal government estimates of the survival rates in the event of a Carrington or an EMP are about 10%, about 90% casualties.
And
which means a population of, what are we, 3.25 billion would suddenly be 3.25 million.
And a lot of these casualties that we could expect to suffer are, number one, probably due to the fact that a lot of people out there simply don't prepare for this type of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's really the issue. And EMP is just an example. It could be a riot situation caused by, we've seen here in LA in 1992, we saw the Rodney King riots where police officers were exonerated, and all of a sudden it's a third of the city is on fire. Those kinds of things can happen just as easily today, if not even easier than before. So any kind of a failure of civility, any kind of a disruption is the kind of thing that we're trying to prepare you for. You could be traveling overseas when a coup occurs. If you were in Egypt during the Arab Spring, it would have gotten a little touch and go there for you. I have family over there, and they at the time, and they had to high. They were expats, Americans living over there.
So that brings us to something that we were talking about is if you ever are in a situation like that, especially overseas. Now, it'll be very chaotic, if I'm correct. It'll be, your adrenaline's going to be surging, especially
Right.
when it first goes down. The best thing that you could possibly do at that point would be to either shelter in place or hide somewhere, if I'm correct.
Until you come up with a plan to move, you need to just stay where you're at. Your priorities are, one, to get out of immediate physical danger. So if someone's shooting at you, you might want to get behind a wall.
Yeah.
But then your second priority is going to be medical check, make sure you're still in one piece and treat yourself. And then you really want to just sit down somewhere, calm yourself, get control of your senses, collect yourself, and then go out with a plan. I usually empty my pockets at that point to see what I have in front of me. Just kind of use that time to formulate a plan for where you're going to go and what you're going to do. And hey, if you're prepared, you might be able to just shelter in place. You might be able to write it out. If you're not, then you're going to have to move. You're going to have to cross the city or do whatever you've got to do to get to a safe place.
And that's another thing that I'll do a review on the class a little later, but when we at the end of this class, we all get kidnapped. We get a hood thrown over our heads, and we get locked up. We got to get out, and it was pretty cool. But the one thing I really took away from it was we're in the middle of a city. A lot of us don't know it. I'm not from LA. I have no idea where I am. It's disorienting. You can only imagine that if that was in another country or in a city and something happens and you find yourself in the middle of that city now, you're not going to have any idea like where you're going, what to do. And so Kevin and I were talking about that afterwards, and he was saying exactly, you need to get somewhere, shelter in place, find
Gather
a
your
place.
wits.
Yeah, gather yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really good.
Yeah, that's it's just a little subtle thing. It can only be 10 minutes at the most. You know, I mean, you may only have 10 minutes of safety there before things go really haywire. But take that time to organize your thoughts and organize your gear and see what you need to do.
And that's another thing. I mean, I know in wilderness, escape and evasion, they talk about you need to move, you need to put distance in between yourself and the tracker force or whatever. But taking that 10 minutes or whatever to really gather yourself, like Kevin said, see what you have in your pockets, what can I use at my immediate vicinity, can really mean the difference between being disoriented and having that mental preparation that, okay, I'm gonna do whatever I need to do to go ahead and survive this situation. And if I'm correct, man, like a lot of this really has to do with mental fortitude, mental preparation as well.
Yeah, it does. It's just developing a mental toughness that says that regardless of what happens, I'm going to be resilient.
Yeah.
I'm going to just keep my head in the game.
Yeah.
A lot of people get just overwhelmed with adrenaline. They get overwhelmed with stress and fear and anxiety, and that 10 minutes gives you a real chance to manage that. And it's possible to manage it.
We were actually going over in class some really solid techniques, how to manage that stress, how to manage that adrenaline, and there are techniques that they're going to share with you about, breathing it down, they call it, and stuff, ways that you can let yourself breathe and that adrenaline can go ahead and start dissipating in your system so that you can have a clear head and think through what you're doing. And, I'll let you kind of figure that out for yourself as far as the class goes, because look, this is something, if you're gonna go overseas, if you're gonna, maybe you're a security contractor, maybe you're not, maybe you're a business guy, right, and you travel to wherever, China, Middle East, something like that, you really should be thinking about going ahead, grabbing one of these courses and training. It's 3 days, and it's probably going to be 3 days of more information than you ever could think that you would have, as far as if you're going to go anywhere and do anything, whether it's traveling here, domestically, or abroad. You really should have one of these courses under your belt, because it's very solid information.
I really appreciate you saying that. But I'm
it's
glad you
the
enjoyed
truth.
it.
It's
been
the
a lot
truth.
of fun.
Yeah. No, it's been a solid time out here, and this is my second class, and it's been probably more fun than the first one, to be honest. So we're gonna go ahead, and Kevin's agreed to really share some very interesting information with us today, stuff that he's not necessarily gonna teach in his civilian courses, but stuff that, you know, I said, look, this is what I do. We were talking, I said, I teach self-preservation, and I not only teach it, but I interview other experts on it. And while we've got Kevin with us today, you know, he said, look, I'll go ahead, I'll share with you guys some stuff that I don't teach, generally speaking, and, you know, we'll go into some really special stuff with you guys. So.
All right. Talking about how to minimize your exposure to video surveillance. And there's a lot of video surveillance today. We are in a state where almost everywhere you go, someone's got a camera pointed in the direction you're traveling. And so it becomes very hard to evade cameras. But if you're conscious of the cameras, then that's the first step in evading. So usually I wear a baseball cap to hide my face if I want to keep my head low. You really can't see what I'm doing. But at some point you're going to have to expose enough of your face to get a look at the ceiling and see where the cameras are. So if I come into a room like this, I'm going to note the cameras. I'm going to sit down somewhere and I'm going to map them out. What I want to do with the map is try and identify where their fields of coverage are so that I can figure out how to negotiate around them. A lot of cameras today are pan, zoom, tilt, but most cameras are passive in that there's nobody monitoring them. They just use them to record so they can come back later and check on something if there's some kind of event. So being able to record where the camera's pointed at the current time is a good idea. Sometimes you have to get close and look at them. Other times you can use binoculars. I use binoculars out in the field all the time because I can be 50, 75 yards away and I can look down the alley and see where the cameras are, make a map, and then as I get closer, I can try and figure out what direction they're going to be pointed. For example, a wall-mounted camera, most of the time there's one mounted on the wall out in the alley. It's going to be pointing down the alley so that it can record traffic and activity in the alley. I don't have to see. A lot of them have domes now that prevent you from seeing where the camera is. I don't have to see where that is to know that it's pointed down the alley. I mean, it's pretty obvious from its placement. So that means that if I'm going to evade the camera, I have to hide my persona. I have to hide my face. A long bill baseball cap pulled down low. One of the things I suggest is if you're going through an area where there are a lot of cameras, is wear shirts, multiple shirts of alternating light and dark. So I walk into a zone wearing a dark shirt, I walk out of that zone and I walk into the next camera zone, I pull the shirt off, stuff it in my bag, and now I'm walking through with a light. And so and maybe I'll turn my hat around or switch hats as well. The idea being that I'm making subtle changes in my appearance that will make it harder for them to track me. It's not a huge thing. It's especially helpful though if there's an actively monitored system. For example, if you're in a store that has video cameras like Walmart or Target or something like that, there's somebody sitting in a control room somewhere watching the cameras to see if your behavior is unusual. And being able to change your appearance in those situations is pretty useful. So that's just the start. So I always make a map, try and calculate coverage, and try and negotiate around them or hide my identity as I go through them. The other thing you can do is take the cameras out by making them ineffective. This is pretty simple, but it requires a little specialized equipment. You need a painter's pole, an extendable painter's pole. If you go to the hardware store, you will find a painter's pole that will extend from 4 feet to 12 feet. That's generally going to be perfect. On the end of it, you attach a sponge, and on that sponge, you smear petroleum jelly. And as you approach that camera, you walk under it, there is something called the shadow effect, which means that while I'm directly under a camera, cameras usually are not pointed down, and that area directly under the camera is relatively safe from observation. With that pole, I extend the sponge up and I smear the dome with the Vaseline, and it blurs the picture. So now you don't get a clear picture out of the camera, and they won't be able to pick up any specifics of your identity. They'll still see somebody moving through there, but it'll just be a blur. And it's better than, for example, cutting the cable to the camera, because if you cut the cable to the camera, they know something's up and they send somebody out. As this technique works because it makes it just look like the autofocus on the camera has gone wacky, and now they'll have to send somebody out to repair it, but it's not going to be a huge priority, generally speaking. So, those are a few things you can do. You can also, using the painter's pole, redirect the camera if it's not covered with a dome. If it's pointed this direction, you can just tap it and point it over here to create a safe zone for travel over there. If you're involved in evasion, sometimes being a gray man is just as effective. Just not acting suspicious at all and blending into the local population. That is by far easier. It takes a lot less effort, but it also is helpful for you to stay aware of your camera coverage and still try and avoid it as much as possible.
We were also talking a little bit about improvised weapons and how important it could potentially be if you were in an evasion situation to go ahead and be able to utilize what's immediately around you in order for you to go ahead and defend yourself. A lot of the times working overseas, whether you're in a protection detail, whether you're doing something else, or whether you're just traveling, you don't have the opportunity to be armed with a sidearm or anything like that.
You have to be able to pick something up and weaponize it, we call it. So as we walk this direction, we look, here's a dumpster. There's some scaffolding here. I might be able to scavenge a piece of steel from that. So I'm just going to climb up and look into the dumpster and see what's there. I could easily just grab a rock and put it in a sock and have a pretty formidable weapon. But this stuff is the gold mine for making clubs and sticks and stuff. I have a saw on my multi-tool, and I could fashion a saw, use that saw to fashion a pretty good club. So being able to weaponize stuff is, and I say stuff, I mean just discarded junk. You'll notice this sign, billboard, there's a ladder that goes up to these decks. It would be very easy to find a way up onto the ladder there and get onto one of those upper decks to find a shelter for the night. It's lit on the other side, so it's pretty dark on that side. There's a lot of contrast. I've been up into that particular crow's nest before, and it's a really good little place to hide out.
So now if you were going to go ahead and need to bed down somewhere for the night, this would be kind of an ideal situation that you could go ahead, spend the night there, get some much needed sleep.
Right. See, one of the big problems with sleeping in the city is being secure. You have to be able, if you're by yourself especially, it's really hard. Exceptional place to hide at night because nobody ever looks up. It's easy to climb. You can climb up there. I have a hammock in my go bag, and I have spent a couple of nights strung up in a tree like this, about 50 feet up, 30, 40 feet up, and actually we had a whole class do it. About 7 guys up in a tree one night. Everybody slept well. We put a safety line on it so that we don't fall out in the middle of the night, but it's one of those places where nobody ever, thanks to Link.
So me and Kevin were talking about a couple of various things regarding surveillance detection, and I did a video once before, but I figured, look, this guy's really an expert, way more than I ever would claim to be. So we're gonna sit down with him and just ask him a couple of quick things about maybe if you're sitting in your vehicle, maybe you're going to and fro. A lot of times what will happen is somebody will pick you up, whether it's a home invader, a kidnapper, something like that. These people have to have you under some type of crude surveillance in order for them to get really a beat on what you're doing and how it can be easy for them to get you. If it's a home invader, yeah, they want to understand like kind of basically what your profile is before they're going to go ahead and, you know, do whatever, kick in your door. And if it's a kidnapper, same thing. They want to basically understand what your patterns are and whatnot in order for them to go ahead and really understand how and when to best get you. So we're going to sit down with Kevin real quick now, and he's going to share with us some of his insight that he's gotten over the years about, number one, how to detect these guys, and maybe a way or two to evade them as well.
You mentioned something that's really important, and that is that in order for somebody to ambush you in any way, they have to pattern you. They have to figure out your routines and your ruts. So the first way to avoid any kind of kidnapping or attack or ambush is to vary your routine, to go different directions, different ways. It gets to be a little tedious sometimes, but it does protect you. The second thing you will do is surveillance detection route, an SDR they're called, which is to put yourself in a normal, everyday kind of situation, but that allows you to see who's there. So, for example, if I left the hotel here this morning and I walked out to the sidewalk, I walk down to the convenience store and I get a cup of coffee. Then I go over to the other hotel here and get a newspaper from their gift shop. And I sit in their lobby for a few minutes. So while I'm at the gas station, I'm looking to see if there's anybody here at the gas station that was at the lobby of the hotel. And if there is, then I look for them again when I get the newspaper. And then I look for them again when I sit out on the sidewalk and read my newspaper. And then I'll probably go another direction, maybe a couple blocks, and drop some dry cleaning off. So what I'm doing is very routine activities, right, that allow me to see if I'm seeing the same person in multiple stops. And if I change directions and make multiple stops and I see somebody more than 3 times, there's 100% chance they're following you. 4 times for sure. So if I got to the dry cleaner and there's the same guy, he's following me. I can do the same thing in a vehicle. I can go to the Starbucks drive-through and then over to the McDonald's drive-through and then over to the newsstand and pick up a newspaper. And after I've made 3 or 4 stops, and it looks like I'm just doing my morning routine, so I'm not drawing suspicion to myself that I'm running an SDR. Unless he's a pro, he won't recognize what I'm doing. If he's a pro, you got bigger problems than I can help you with. But that's the general idea of running an SDR, and it's very important that you're consistent with it. The big problem most people have with security is they let it lapse. They become complacent. They forget about it. They just don't have time, whatever. It's one of those things that if you're going to do, you have to do it every single day. And that's a hard thing to teach. It's hard to get people to do that. They don't want to do this irritating process every day. But if you just build it into your routine, now this day you go to this coffee shop, next day you go to that coffee shop. You have to vary your routine so you're not running an SDR at the same places, or he'll just wait for you at the 4th place and you'll never know. So again, variation of routine, variation of direction, and variation of time are all crucial elements to detecting surveillance.